I am super excited for you to meet today's podcast guest today. I met her a little over a month ago, and she just makes me smile every time we talk and catch up. And she's doing some really awesome stuff in the world. And so I'm going to let Shannon Addison introduce herself, and we'll go from there.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Shannon Addison. And yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Jess at a wonderful women's conference. And to say that you are not just like a light at a table is an understatement. I was immediately drawn to you because you exude everything that you teach. And it's just nice to know when people are that genuine. You want to definitely be, you want to be in their realm, in their world. So I am so happy to be here and to talk about what it is that I'm doing. I founded a brand. It's a children's brand called My Crummy World, and it's comprised of the breadcrumbs that I have behind me here.
I love them. If you're listening on audio, go to my website and make sure you see this video as well, because it's a whole puppet line. They're adorable. But yes.
Anyway, yes. So they are the breadcrumbs, and it's comprised of Penelope Pumpernickel, Rachel Rye, Samantha Sourdough, Whitney Wheat, and PJ, Penelope's little sister, and her dog Pepper. And they're called the breadcrumbs. That was all inspired by this idea that I had when I was a kid, that if you dropped a trail of breadcrumbs, you could find your way. You know, it wasn't Hansel and Gretel, that you find your way back if you get lost. Well, I always thought that was such a novel idea that you actually could find your way if you left a trail of breadcrumbs. And so the way that I look at the world right now is that girls are lost and they're trying to fit some image that society is dictating that they be. And because they're trying so hard to be someone they're not, they lose sight of who they are. So the breadcrumbs were designed to leave this trail of breadcrumbs through their stories and their activities and their experiences and their mistakes, so that girls can follow along this trail and learn through these lessons and find their way back to who they're supposed to be, which is a more authentic version of themselves. I mean, that's what we want. We want girls to be who they are, to actually celebrate and enjoy the differences that they bring to the table, not be a clone of every other girl in the room.
Right.
And that is unfortunately where we are. So my goal is to try to get girls to really fall in love with who they are for who they are. And that's what the breadcrumbs aim to do through all of the things that they do, which I have books. And I know I'm showing this to you, but I have books, and I have a website, and I have all kinds of tools for parents.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to get parents much more engaged, with their daughters at an early age, so that we can start teaching girls the importance of being authentic. And it's hard. It's hard in the age that we're in right now because of technology. Parents don't take the time to connect. They claim they don't know how to connect. They've lost the ability to connect. It just starts by having the right kinds of discussions. And if you don't know how to do that, then we provide you the discussion prompts in the books. We're giving you ideas to start having these kinds of conversations, so that ultimately we can have a generation of girls who are nicer, who are kinder, and who are happier, which I know falls in line with what you're trying to do.
That's what I love to hear. I know. I love it. So, I mean, the second you started explaining this to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And that was before I even saw these puppets and the characters. And you can see all this. You're on YouTube, you're on Instagram, you're in all the places. You have books.
Everywhere.
You always post pictures of kids who are baking and interacting. And so I want you to talk about, like, how do families interact and engage with this content? Because you think of it too as like curriculum, right? That's kind of how you.
I do. And it's funny because curriculum is kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah. I say curriculum and some people light up and they're like curriculum, and other people are like curriculum. But I mean, it really,
I guess, was my thinking. It's this whole
it is very holistic. And I tell you, when I started this, my goal was not necessarily to have a baking book and a baking line, but somebody said to me, a very wise person said, why on earth aren't you doing something with baking? Your characters are made out of bread. And once you see the bread heads, you can't unsee it. I
Yes.
mean, they
Yes.
are. It's
Yes.
bread. And the one thing that we found, I mean, among so many other things during the pandemic, is that the kitchen is a place where so many families
Yeah.
connect, kind of the
Yeah.
center of the house. That's where you come together and you start talking. And the kinds of conversations that people were having in the kitchen,
Yeah.
it's a pun, I know, but it's so much more organic than sitting your kids down on the couch and saying, let's have a chat. The minute you use that phrase, let's have a little talk,
Yeah.
you're going to lose them because they're going to feel like they're going to be interrogated for the next 30 minutes or so. And so the walls go up and they don't want to talk to you. Whereas if you're in the kitchen and you're doing something together anyway, and you have prompts available to you. I mean, I have stories so that, like, if you're making bread, and I have recipes for all the different kinds of breads. So I'm trying to introduce kids to
I love
pumpernickel.
it.
Why they're not eating pumpernickel bread, I don't know, 'cause it's wonderful. But I have all the recipes, and anytime you're making bread, there's time that you have to let the dough rise. You have a lot of downtime in baking. So during that time, that's a perfect opportunity to sit down and say, hey, I've got a story. Let's sit down and go through a story together so you don't lose their attention, because this is time that you've dedicated to spending together. And then you can go through a story. And of course, my stories come directly from, these are experiences either from myself or from my kids. There's a story in there called Second Best, taken from my daughter's own experience in second grade, where her friend told her at school one day, guess what? You're my second best friend.
Oh, yes.
I
I've
mean,
actually heard that from my
oh,
daughter, like
she
from
was
my
devastated,
kids.
just devastated.
Like they're ranking their, like in second grade, that's right, first and second grade, like they're ranking their friends, and they don't mean any harm. It's just how it
They
happens. And
rank,
yes.
they
And
rank their friendships. And this is something that is prevalent among girls. It's not so much so among boys, but girls rank their friendships. And so when I talk to parents about this, because when she came home and told me this, I wasn't prepared to have that conversation. I didn't know I had to. So I tell parents now, okay, look, if you're going to talk to your girls, you say, look, I understand that girls rank their friendships. And if this is something that you're doing, fine. But you need to know that if you are going to go through this process of ranking friendships, you might not always come out on top. And you have to think about what that feels like. And if you know what that feels like, then you need to think about that when you're projecting that to someone else. It's just time to at least make them responsible for these kinds of decisions. You know, I'm not trying to change. Girls have been ranking friendships forever. And it's going to be a huge change, and I wish they didn't. I wish that we could just learn to appreciate the people that come in and out of our lives at different times for different reasons, because they serve a purpose. And that's a great lesson to tell girls and to try to teach girls. But if you can't do that, at very least say, okay, look, you're going to have to take responsibility for the decisions that you're making. So if you're ranking your friendships, fine. But here's what happens when you don't come out on top. And boy, that is a tough one to learn when you're not prepared for it.
well, and it's tough, as you said, it's tough for the kids.
Oh,
But it's also tough for the parents to watch their kids do this and not know, like, as you said, and not know or be prepared for that conversation. And I think that's what's so wonderful is, like, this is real life.
Yes.
And you're trying to give people tools to navigate this
so
that everyone's set up for success, whatever that looks like. And so that kids feel like they can be authentically themselves. And feel safe in that.
Yeah. And it empowers them to actually navigate these friendships in a way. I tell you, I could take you, if I took you through my experience in elementary school and my poor fifth grade male teacher who didn't know how to deal with all of the girl drama. And the girl drama always spills over into the classroom because girls are so good at flying under the radar with what they're doing, because they communicate more non-verbally. And now, I mean, it's blown up exponentially because of the internet and social media. But even then, I think about our poor teacher who he didn't know how to deal with all the problems that were, spilling into the class. And he would just set us outside in a circle and tell us, figure it out. And, when I talk to parents about this now and I say, look, girls have mastered this. This starts for girls. This starts kindergarten, even before, and it's relational aggression. Girls have the market on relational aggression. And that's partly why if you've read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, he talks
Oh
about
yeah, yeah,
girls and relational aggression. This is one of the reasons why social media affects them the way that they do, because this is where girls live. And I just think about the immediate gratification for a girl when she wants to get something and she's in kindergarten and says, look, if you don't do XYZ, I won't be your friend anymore. And
yes,
man,
yes,
that withholding of friendship is so powerful, and immediately gets what they want. They get the reaction they're looking for. And so, and I talk about this with parents, girls start testing out these behaviors early.
yeah,
And they start it in kindergarten or even before kindergarten, and they test it to see what works. And if they're not getting, and they get feedback from their peers, but the peers are kind of fearful. This is where teachers make a huge difference, and parents make a huge difference, because if they find this doesn't work, then they're going to have to start tweaking, what
yeah,
they're doing.
yeah,
And yet what we find is happening is that girls get constant reinforcement that, hey, this is acceptable. So when they reach third grade, and that's kind of
yeah,
the turning point, if they determine that this is acceptable, then this is kind of the set behavior that they then take to middle school. And that's where everything gets more interesting.
yeah,
Because they think this is the right way to act. And no one has changed this. So I've gotten constant reinforcement for behaving this way. And
right.
this is where schools miss the mark on anti-bullying programs, because
Mm,
they apply the same model to all, it's like we
yeah,
talked about this earlier, where you say, what does bullying look like? And of course, people get the idea of it's physical, it's male, it's the bigger child telling the smaller child, I'm going to take your lunch money.
yeah.
And that's not what
Yeah.
bullying is. That's not it. And I had a principal who once said, and this was a high school principal who I spoke to at a conference, who said, it's interesting. We have a bullying problem in our school, and we know we have this problem, but we can't see it because it's among the,
Mm,
they said, and when it's among the girls, you don't know what to look for. And this is really what I'm trying to get at when I talk to parents, because I say, you will see these signs in girls when they're young. You'll
mm,
see it. And if you don't change it, they take it with them. And that's what they go into middle school and high school. And that's where it really blows up. And there's so much we can do. There's
yeah.
so much we can do if we just start younger.
So give an example of a story that might be in that might be in this world, the breadcrumbs, right? Like, what is a story that is helping parents and kids navigate this?
Oh, I have a perfect story. And this was one that was taken from my own personal experience. And it's on something that is referred to as a yo-yo friendship. And I don't know if you're familiar with yo-yo
Okay.
friendships, but when I was in fifth grade, I was friends with somebody who one day I was her absolute best friend in the world. And I mean,
Mm,
I was on top of the world when I was her best friend. And the next day I was kind of her arch nemesis or her arch enemy. And and when that day came, I didn't want to go to school. And I knew I would have an inkling that something was up. And I would tell my mom, please, don't make me go to school. I don't want to go to school today. And I ended up having to go to the doctor and have my stomach x-rayed because I had so many stomach aches in fifth grade. So I didn't want to
oh,
go to school because I knew what was waiting for me at
it was
school.
the anxiety of it
It
all.
was
It
so
was
much
the
anxiety
yeah.
because of
Oh,
it.
because
And
of the do you belong or do you not belong? That's like the number one question, right? Okay.
and
Yes,
it and
I'm sure we've all had those relationships as kids.
And when girls place this much emphasis and this much pressure on the acceptance of one person,
Yeah.
it's like if you put all your eggs in that one basket, you are setting yourself up for potential disaster, because
Mm,
you can't maintain that. And I needed to, and it was such a hard thing for me. I really needed to come to terms with the fact that I was not always going to be in favor with this person. I needed to expand my horizons in terms of the friends that I spent my time with. I always said I don't ever feel like I was the cool kid in school, but I was always cool kid adjacent.
I love that. That was probably me too, honestly. I love that. That's
I mean, because you think about it, I was always the tallest,
yeah,
always the
yeah,
tallest. And people look at me now and say, oh, isn't it because I'm 6 feet tall? And people are like, oh my gosh, isn't it so great to be tall? I said, yeah, it's great now. It was not great then.
Yeah. I stood out like a sore thumb back then. Yeah.
Yes. And
Oh, yeah.
so I was kind of awkward and gangly and,
Mhm.
and so I always wanted to be, it was like I tried to be close to the people who I thought were so cool. And I wanted to be accepted by those people and fit in. And that doesn't pay off. It
Yeah.
doesn't. And so much so that one of the things I really have a hard time coming to terms with, and I talk about because I want to be very open about my own experience. When I was in favor with this particular person
Yeah.
and I was one of her favorites, she always had those that she was rejecting. At any
Oh,
moment
yeah.
there was somebody else. And I was that bystander who I wasn't going to get involved. And so rather than sticking up for the person that was the object of her, I just kind of stood in the background and tried not to. It was like I was blending in.
Yeah.
And I think about that now because I talk to parents about how important it is to have these kinds of conversations with our kids about sticking up for the underdog. You
Yeah.
really need to be that kid who sticks up for him. And I wasn't because I didn't want to. I was just so happy that I was
Yeah.
not the person who was the object of,
Right. Right.
her.
It was
So
you or them.
yes,
And
yes.
that's a terrible situation to be in.
And it's very real though. And I
It
see it.
is. It
I
is.
see it happening. When I started the brand, I was volunteering at my daughter's school and I watched the behavior of girls in fourth grade. And
Mm.
I was watching this and thinking to myself, it took me back to my own experiences. And I thought, I can't believe that not only has nothing changed, and these girls are still so wise to how to get
Yes.
away with all of it and fly under the radar of all the,
Mhm.
the eyes that are watching them in the lunchroom
Mhm.
or whatever's happening. But that girls now have so many additional layers placed on
Mm.
this that it used to be they'd have to deal with this at school. That was my reality. And so I would go home and at least I had a safe place at home, and they don't
Yeah.
have that safe place now. And so I think about where parents are now having to deal with this. And that's why I had a discussion starting then with my mom. I said, I want to develop something. I
Yeah.
want to have it was almost like saying, I want to have some kind of mouthpiece or megaphone or something I can speak through. And then it ended up becoming my
Yeah.
character, my
Yeah.
brand, to allow parents to have tools and to start providing these messages to girls that it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to mess up. It's okay to, so since I'm telling you all of the things, when I tell this story, it's a great story that I go out when I was giving speeches to kids. And when I first started this, I was out talking with girls at schools and giving them kind of my perspective on how I started and what I'm doing. But I love telling the story, especially to, it was like, I think it was third to fifth grade girls at an
Okay.
elementary school I was talking to. And I told them, I said, hey, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And of course, they go through the invisibility or flight or, the standard
Right. Right.
powers that most kids would pick. And I said, well, I happen to have an actual superpower. And of course, they thought, wow, this is tremendous. You have a superpower. And I said, no, I really do. And so I said, would you like to hear about it? And I proceeded to tell him the story about when I was in sixth grade. I was picked to be, it was a play that I was in. And I wanted to play opposite the role of a kid that I had a crush on in sixth grade. And I worked so hard and I got this leading parts. And we ended up, it was all being filmed because we were learning not just how to do a play, but how to put it on a production. We learned like how to film it and all the film production
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
all of it. So the big day comes and I'm so prepared for my role. And I had this role down. I was ready to go. And they start filming and I'm extremely nervous. And the kid he was such a nice guy. He realized that I was nervous. And so he's trying to kind of set my mind at ease. And he tells me this joke and it wasn't even that funny. It was something like, what do you call a deer with no eyes? No-eyed deer. But I was nervous. And when you are
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
unbelievably nervous. And so I start laughing and I get that nervous laugh going
Yeah.
and it just starts taking over and I start laughing harder and harder and harder. And I'm realizing not only can I not stop laughing,
Yeah.
but I wet my pants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, I'm telling this to a group of third to fifth grade girls and their mouths just fall open.
Yeah.
Because I was in sixth grade.
Yeah.
I was in kindergarten, 6th grade.
Mm.
And so they're looking at me as I'm giving this talk to all these girls. And I said, you know what I did the very next day? I got up and I went to school.
Yeah.
And I'm here right now in front of you. I survived. I survived what you probably think is the most horrifically embarrassing
Right,
thing
right,
ever.
right.
And I have the knowledge that
Yeah.
I can survive that. And that
Mm.
is an actual superpower.
Yes.
So, and I think about that in terms of today's, see, and it absolutely is a superpower, but you know the difference between now and then?
Yeah.
This,
Yeah. The phone. Yeah.
the phone.
Yeah.
Because had it happened to me now, it would
It would be
be
everywhere. It
everywhere.
would be
You
everywhere.
would, you wouldn't be able to,
And that's what you were saying earlier. Like kids that they come home from school and they're still not safe from it
right,
because it just lives everywhere because of
everywhere.
phones and social media.
Everywhere. And that's something that, so when I go out and I talk to parents now and I
Mhm.
discuss trying to work with girls starting at a very young age, and as we work with kids as they get older, that I am so on board with this idea that we really need to try to limit, if not restrict, phone use. I really don't think kids need phones
Yeah.
before they're done with elementary school. And I get it if they start playing sports and doing extracurricular activities in middle school, but do they need a smartphone?
Right. Well,
And
what's interesting is I think that the question applies to us as adults
I
too,
know,
honestly. Like,
I
do
know
we need just because we can have this doesn't mean it's actually serving us
exactly,
and it's doing anything good for us or adding value.
exactly.
But yeah, like it is they're on stages 24/7.
Constant.
Um,
You don't get to be kids.
yeah,
I mean, you think about now you live in a fear of not making mistakes, not having embarrassing moments, and you're talking to the queen. I could tell you stories just within the last few years
yeah,
that are so, and my friends, so unbelievably embarrassing. And yes, some of them still involve restroom problems. So I'm just saying, I I am somebody who I have to own the fact that
yeah,
something embarrassing is going to happen to me because it always does.
yeah.
And I'm okay with that because I've
Right.
learned that if I take myself too seriously, that's the biggest mistake I could make. But these kids,
Yeah.
they are so terrified of ever being caught doing anything that might be construed as being embarrassing. And that is not the world that we want our
Right.
kids in. They need to have the freedom to make mistakes and to
Yeah.
maybe trip and fall and become embarrassed and get up
Right.
and brush it off and move on, because that's where you start building
Yeah.
resilience. And
Right. Right. Right.
so, and all of these are keys to having happier kids. It's like
Yeah.
when you look at, if I were to talk to a group of parents right now and say, okay, if you knew there was something that was endangering your kids, or you knew it was toxic for your kids, would you get it out of their environment? And 100% absolutely one, yes.
Yes.
And you say, okay, well, guess what? This is what Instagram and
Yeah.
Snapchat are doing
Right.
to your
Right.
kids.
And then
This
all of a
is,
sudden it's,
and they're like,
I
no,
know, I know,
but
I know. So, so as I'm listening to this, what I'm hearing is we are in such a culture and it starts so young. And I can completely vouch for that because I have, a second and third grader. And it is hard to parent in those dynamics, especially if you don't know, when they come home and say that they're no longer so and so's best friend. Like that's hard to hear as a parent, and it's hard to watch your kid,
go through it.
struggling over it. But what I'm hearing is it's almost like it's so black and white. It's either you belong or you're ostracized. And that's the kind of world that our kids feel like they live in. If I do one thing, I'm
Yes.
ostracized. I'm no longer allowed to be a part of this. And so I will do almost everything I can to belong. I will sacrifice myself. And I know I
Yes.
live for this. I will sacrifice myself to fit in,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
And
I will also play those games to protect my space here.
yeah. Oh yeah. I think it affects girls even to a greater extent than it does boys,
Yeah,
because girls, in terms of the things that boys and girls look for, boys seem to be drawn more toward agency and girls tend to be drawn more toward communion
yeah,
and acceptance and
yeah,
community,
yeah,
and this is why girls will risk it all to
yeah,
belong, because
yeah,
belonging is so important to them. And you know, and it's not to say when they reach a certain point, well, are we past that point? Have we missed, we kind of missed the boat on
right,
this thing? And I think it's never too late to really try to develop this kind of connection with your kids and to bring them
right,
back in. And to, especially when you look at these long-term studies in Gen Z, all these Gen Zers who are saying that they have regrets about how much time they spend on social media.
yeah,
And I will say,
yeah,
when you look at just people's own personal experiences, or the, whatever they even try to do, limiting their kids' time on their phones and on social media, and they talk about this bump. It's
yeah,
almost like you remove the phone and say, okay, we're going to go on it was a story I heard actually in a podcast where this family went on a camping trip and they said to their kids, we're taking your phones. And of
right,
course the
right,
kids were like, no, you can't take our phones, you can't take our phones. And they actually experience symptoms
right,
of withdrawal, and they
yeah,
do, they go through withdrawal, and the
yeah,
parents almost gave in because the kids went through this withdrawal.
yeah,
But then they found, after they got over that hump, that
yes,
the kids were all of a sudden engaged and
mhm,
happy and
mhm,
starting to act like themselves again. So you
yeah,
tell parents who have older kids, you can still have the same result by doing this with your kids. Get them off of these phones for a while and get them engaged in
yeah,
their lives. So I mean, it's doable. But if you start when they're younger
yeah,
and they don't develop this need, I think you're going to be so far ahead of the game, and I think you're
yeah,
going to have happier kids as a result. If I could go back and do things differently, oh my goodness, my husband and I both have said,
yeah,
but granted, our youngest developed a chronic medical condition right after right after smartphones, and
yeah,
we thought, well, this is going to keep her more connected with her kid, her
yeah,
friends.
yeah,
And it didn't. It had the absolute opposite effect on her. And so, and I talk about this when I talk to parents, I talk about my own personal experiences with it and what we went through and seeing it now. And both of our kids even say,
yeah,
we're off of it. We stay off of it. We've seen
right,
it. We don't, and I mean, that's why it's like, if you can tell parents who are there now with kids who are younger, please listen to us who've been
right,
through it and take the
right.
advice.
Well, and it's interesting too, because once you understand the brain science behind it too, right? So the reason we have that withdrawal, first of all, the phones, the TVs, even kids shows these days,
Yeah.
they're so fast and stimulating because of that dopamine hit, and they're built to do that. And phones are built to make
Well,
you addicted
mm,
because of that dopamine hit. It
absolutely.
doesn't even matter if it's positive or negative experience. The dopamine comes from the
Yes.
engagement and seeing what's there.
Yep.
And so you do have the withdrawal because your brain goes, I don't know what to do.
I know.
It's so interesting because this week, because we know we're going into the holidays, and so we said there will be absolutely no screens in the house this week. And my kids were like, "Excuse me." And we're 7 and 9, and they're at school most of the day anyway, and we don't do a lot of screens. I mean, so they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
For the first day, and we do no screen Sundays, so we do one day a week every week. But we're doing the whole week knowing that we're traveling and things are going to get wild, and after one day, like, they don't even ask for screens anymore.
I know.
Like, it doesn't.
It
I
doesn't
think
take.
what that hump is it's their brain going, I can get dopamine from other sources.
Yeah.
I can
And
get
they don't need
dopamine from
it for.
interactions with
Yeah.
people, from
They
doing
yeah,
things I love. I can get my serotonin from being in nature, right? And so when we allow our brains to experience all these other things, we realize we don't actually need the dopamine.
exactly. Exactly.
Um,
And
okay,
I
yeah,
wish parents were not afraid to go down that road. And
yeah, yeah,
I know, I get it, but
yeah,
I said, I really, when I get in front of parents, I say, parents have got to commit to quit. You have to commit to quit for some period of time with your kids. You have to do this.
yeah,
It just, I mean, look at it as your very own experiment. Say,
yeah,
I'm going to do this for 3 or 4 days and see what
yeah,
difference it makes in their lives. I'm telling you, it
yeah. it benefits everyone. I was going to say, and that's the thing, is I think it's so hard for parents to think about their lives without the phone all the time, because that feels really hard, and so it's hard for us to think about what the impact is on our kids. But if you just do it as a family, even if it's one day a week, to start to train your brain to say it's going to be okay.
I
Okay,
agree.
so just because I know we are going to talk for hours here, you and me. Okay, because we're going to go into the future vision here in a second, but what is, if people just took away one message from the Breadcrumbz world, from this whole world that you've built for girls and parents, what is that one message you hope they walk away with?
I think the absolute road to happiness is paved in a world full of connection. And technology is a great thing because it's introducing us to this world filled with prompts that, I mean, with Chat GPT, you can go anywhere and do just about anything. But we have to be so mindful that innovation serves a purpose.
Yeah.
But that purpose is not, I mean, it's not innovation's job to help us connect. In fact, innovation in many ways has really led to so much more disconnection and isolation. And we have to, I mean, you look at the world we live in now with Zoom meetings and remote learning and remote working, and it takes so much more now to connect than it used to. And people have to actually make an effort to do it. And it's, and I feel for these poor kids, it's becoming harder and harder for kids to learn how to do this because it's not as natural as it used to be. It used to, I mean, going to camp and learning, I mean, you learned constantly how to just connect, start conversations with people you don't know. And we are raising a generation of kids who don't know how to do that. And we are also raising a generation of parents who don't know how to do that either. So I really, my goal is, and I talk, it's all about building connection. And because I am someone who is not afraid of being embarrassed, I have gone out of my way in so many ways in my life where I've had weird jobs and done all kinds of crazy things. I mean, I went to welding school.
Oh, I know. You told me that. I was like, oh, I love her already. Yes, I know.
So being in rooms with people who, you talk about one of these things is not like the other. Well, that's been me in on so many different occasions. So I have put myself in positions where I have to find a way to connect with people who I completely differ from. You know, it's like I couldn't be more different from people that in this room than I, you know, if I tried. And I think that's the best. It is the best exercise in stepping out of your comfort zone, in really testing who you are and putting, it may be an awkward foot, but putting your foot forward and saying, hey, we may come from completely different worlds, but we're here together. And so since we're here together, we're connecting on some level, and let's explore that. And teaching kids to do this. Kids used to do this. And if you'll watch, if you let them, they do it naturally because kids come with no bias. Bias comes from the parents and the adults. It doesn't come from the kids. So we need to really learn from that, especially today. That take a, you know, it's like take a little more interest in how kids do this, and kind of go there. So, and I'm doing this again with the baking because, and I did not know how to bake when I started this. People say, so are you some kind of wizard in the kitchen? No, I taught myself how to bake all these different kinds of breads when I wrote the book. I spent a lot of time in the kitchen, and I found that that is such a great place for parents who don't know how to start. That's a great place to do it, to start doing something and getting your hands dirty and working together, and then start having conversations. Just see where it goes. That's connection. And so there are ways that we need to work to connect as families. There are ways we need to work to connect. I know you do this in the workforce. There are always ways to connect with one another, even if you are totally different people. So, and that's really my goal, is I'm trying to help build connection. And it's like, if you can connect parents and their kids together, you're going to find that your kids are going to connect with their peers better as well. So what does that
world look and feel like? If we can change this trajectory, right? If we can really start changing how girls see relationship and how they allow themselves to enter into connection and relationships and friendships. And I will say too, it is the parents, because I think it's really hard to make friends these days. I think it's really hard for all of us to do. So what does that world look like when we finally can figure it out?
Oh, I envision a world, and I say I truly believe that if girls, and I speak to girls more so than boys, I know, and a lot of people ask me why, and it's because I have girls, and as we discussed, girls and boys bullied differently, and so I can't use the same approach to both. And I'm not suggesting that I will not address the boy side of this. That's all in future development. But with respect to girls, I can tell you that if girls like themselves for who they are, if they actually feel like they're okay just as they are not going to feel the need to bring others down around them. And so when you say, what does this world look like? I think it looks like a world where girls are reaching out and making friends with girls that they wouldn't be making friends with otherwise.
Yeah.
And so many things can be done to help facilitate this.
Yeah.
If I'm just saying, okay, what does that world look like? I like worlds where classrooms have alternative seating plans, where teachers move that classroom around all the time. So that kids don't form cliques and they start learning more about each other in the class. There are so many things that we could be doing differently just to kind of help this process along so that kids connect more with kids they wouldn't be connecting with otherwise. I just think that's, and again, and I think if teachers see this, and I will say I'm on a foundation in my local community, and we award grants to schools, and there was a classroom that did an alternative seating as a grant.
Yeah.
I walked in, I didn't know what to expect. And I walked in to this room just thinking, oh, so they use different seating methods. What is so great about this?
Yeah.
When I walked into this classroom, the entire energy was different in the classroom. The kids were excited about learning. The kids they knew each other. They had each other's backs. I mean, it changed. Such a little thing made such a big difference. And so when you see the snowball effect of little changes like that making huge differences, think about what we could do. Think about it. Yes,
I know. I'm right here with you. I'm like, yes, why are we not already doing all this stuff? Because the truth is we all know that when we show up as our best selves, we lift everyone else up around us. And
100%.
if we can reach kids in those younger formative years and help them understand how to connect more deeply.
Yes.
How to connect with more people, like not put all your eggs in one basket. We're living that right now with my 7-year-old. Like the yo-yo friend I feel that so much right now. And it's hard to say anything to them except, well, you have all these let's talk about all these other friends, you know? But understanding that it is community and it is societal, but you're right. Like we need to have those conversations when they're young so that as they grow up, they're more confident in themselves and their belonging, and they create spaces.
Yes.
Where more people feel like they belong.
And if you establish this kind of relationship when they're young and they are coming to you with the little stuff, and I know my husband loves when I tell this story because this is me throwing him under the bus a little, and I apologize to him in advance. When my daughter was in 2nd or 3rd grade, we're getting ready to go to sleep, and she would come running in our bedroom, and it's like 9:30 at night, and she was supposed to have been asleep for about an hour at this point. And she would come up to the side of the bed and say, "Mom, oh, I forgot to tell you. So-and-so said to me that," and my husband would kind of roll over and say to me, it's what are you doing? It's bedtime. And I said, hold on. I said, she's not sleeping, which means this is on her mind and she can't sleep. I need to hear her out. Just give me a second and let me listen to this.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was some silly little friendship problem that she was having at the time, but it was keeping her up.
She's replaying it in her head.
She's replaying it and replaying it. And we talked it through. and she figured it out
Mhm.
and she went back to bed. And let me tell you, because she did that and I didn't push her away,
Mhm.
she will continue coming back to me
Yes.
as these problems get bigger.
Mhm.
She's still coming to me because she knows she can. And I'm not going to, it's like I'm not going to
Yeah.
rebuff it. I'm going to say, nope, bring me, bring me the issues. Let's talk
Yeah.
it through. And that's something, and I know parents are busy and they're overscheduled, but these are the moments that you have opportunities. Again,
Right.
small things that make big changes
Yeah.
because it snowballs. So
Well, and if your kid is, because I think about that too. My 7-year-old's a verbal processor, and it happens at bedtime, right? That's where
yeah,
we haven't heard about things for the 4 hours they've been home, and all
yeah.
of a sudden we're like, whoa, what happened
Whoa.
today? But it's because they finally got to a point where they're
Mhm.
like, okay, I've processed this and I'm ready to share it. And you have two choices as a parent, right? You can go, it's bedtime, we'll do this tomorrow, which tells them, I'm not going to help you with this, right?
Exactly.
It's not important.
Yeah.
Or you let them process. And so much of it I've learned is I don't even need to say anything. I
Anything.
just need to
Mhm.
let them verbalize it,
Exactly.
and then they can
They
sleep
can do it.
because
Yep.
it's out of here. They're done ruminating,
Yes.
right? So that's what it is. We just ruminate
Yeah.
on every single action that was taken or behavior through. I mean, I do that.
We do it still. Oh, I know. Adults do it too. And I would love to be able to say, excuse me, honey, but
I know.
let me just get 30 things off my chest real quick.
Well,
I can sleep fine.
like, I'll let you process, but then I'm going to process to you. No, can I do this too? It's so true. Okay, so because it is about creating, I think that's huge. It's about creating those safe spaces. And I
Absolutely.
think, it's safe spaces at schools because it's safe spaces where kids can be kids. It's with parents at home, and it is safe spaces that don't happen behind screens, right? Like, you can't really, as much as it is a tool in connection, and you mentioned this, it is a tool. It doesn't replace the human to human connection,
Right.
and we don't get to read and feel one another's energy and intent from behind
Exactly.
the screen.
You cannot,
Um,
through texting,
you
you
can't,
absolutely cannot read someone's intent or exactly. You can't do it.
yeah. And so they're tools, but we have to understand that they're tools with major limitations when it
Right.
comes to the connection that we need and the belonging that we need to feel.
Right.
Okay, so how do we get from, besides your lovely puppets, but how do we get from, and you've mentioned this a lot, today to a world where girls feel like they belong and people feel safe to be themselves? Because I know I talk a lot about authenticity is one of the pillars of happiness. It is so,
Yes.
so important
So important.
to be able to feel safe showing up as yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I've started this platform where I'm trying to get out and talk to parents. I want to
Yeah.
get in front of parents and teachers and administrators and guidance counselors and talk to them about
Yeah.
what's going on in the schools and what their role in it is. And I am
Mhm.
not suggesting, I think parents are pivotal,
Yeah.
but everybody can play a very small role in trying to create these spaces where kids can be authentically
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah.
And so I go out and I talk about this, but of course I have tools. I have my puppets. I take my puppets out and I use them. I have, and this is a shameless plug, but I do have this new, and I love this. I'm not going to lie. I created this catch the match game or see this catch the match.
Oh, fun, yeah.
So it's a memory or concentration game, but it's, I mean,
Oh, they're affirmations.
they're all affirmations.
Oh,
I
I
stand
love
up
it. Yeah.
for others when they are not treated fairly. And I tell parents, these are great cards. I'm kind
Yes.
to my friends and family. These are great cards that you can use almost as a like discussion
Yeah.
prompt. I'm
Yeah.
confident that I can become whatever I want. And so I tell parents who purchase these, you can use them. I mean, they can use them as a little memory game, but you can stick them in a lunchbox. You can say, hey,
Oh, yeah.
just crack the deck. Let's see what we come up with and let's talk about it. And so like some of them are, I stand up for others when they're treated unfairly. You can say, hey, have you ever had to do this? Let's talk.
Right.
I mean, it's so
Right.
easy to have those kinds of conversations. And I have found when I take my puppets out and I work with girls, and I've gone out
Mm.
and worked with girls at our local Boys and Girls Club, and they are so much fun to work with. And I will give them an idea. I'll say, hey, in this story that we're going to talk about, here's the conflict that these two friends are having. And then I'll say to them, have you ever had this conflict with your friends? And they all sit,
Oh
no,
yeah.
no, not my friends. No. So I say, okay, that's fine. And so we take the puppets. I said, we're going to act out a little piece from this story. And we go through and we start acting it out.
Yeah.
And they see it they actually see it in action.
Mm.
And it's interesting because as soon as we get done, and one of them, of course, because they're imperfect, will hurt one of the other's feelings, something will happen. And then immediately, oh, well, you had no idea. So and so once did such and such to me, and I couldn't. And I mean, they're
Right.
sharing everything
Yeah.
because all of a sudden we've shifted away from what's going on in your life to what's going on in their lives and how does it relate to you. And that little shift
Mm.
takes all of the onus off of them to
Yeah.
give up any information.
Right.
And when they don't think they're giving up information freely, they'll share it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It applies with your kids. It's the same thing with your own kids. That's why when you read stories with them and you're actually going through someone else's experience, they're more apt to start relating their own personal feelings and experiences with you. So these are ways, and again, I say these are some of the tools that I'm trying to provide to parents just to start having these conversations. And that's what I want to do. That is my goal. Is I say I am passionate about enriching and improving the lives of girls. And the way that we do it is by building connection. And that starts with the right kinds of conversations. So, and all of these things I sell on my site, they're all tools to do that.
Yeah.
So
what is one thing our listeners can do on a personal level when they wrap up this podcast episode? What is one thing they could do to get us a step closer to this world of connection and empowerment for people?
I think most importantly, I think it is to really take a look at how much time, and this is a hard one, that you're spending in conversation with these people who are in your lives, who you've been, have been entrusted to you to care for them. Really look at the amount of time you spend actually having real conversation with them about what's going on and how much time you could be spending in real conversation with them. And it's hard because I know, like I said, I know parents are being pulled in so many different directions. PTA membership is declining across the country. Parents are disengaging. Engage. Take the time and engage. Growing up, I remember thinking my parents embarrassed the heck out of me because they showed up at everything and it was obnoxious. We would have a game that would be hours. I would play softball and we would have a game that was hours away and no parents would go. And my parents would come trudging out there with, they would have like an igloo to sit on and they would sit on an ice chest because there was because it was so far and so remote. And my friends would make fun of me. And I was like, oh, do you guys have to go to everything? Are you serious? Why? And I look back on that now and it means, it makes me emotional. It means everything. So I tell parents, engage while you can. It makes such a difference in your child's life. You've got to engage. And that means you need to be responsible for the amount of time that you're spending on your phone. Period.
Do you have like a question or like a go-to prompt that parents can do? Like if they're going, okay, I want to engage, but I don't know how, I haven't done this. Like what is like the simplest question to ask or way to start something?
I would say start by asking how to connect? How do I connect with I really think that's where you have to start. And I'm surprised really at the number of parents who say it's hard to figure out how to connect with my kid when they spend so much time on, if they're on their phones or they're on, they're gaming or they're on their console, they're on whatever. And And how do I bridge that gap? And it's not even so much as with parents. I tell you what, when I go to vendor shows and things, and I have these baking boxes where I sell my interactive baking book, and I have a hat and apron set, and I've got color coded coordinating measuring cups. I mean, it's a whole thing. So I have these cute little baking boxes that I sell. And when I first started, I thought, I'm selling this. Somebody said, well, who's your ideal customer? And I said, well, it's a mom. Of course, it's a mom. I mean, and moms they want to engage with their kids in the kitchen, and they don't know how to do that. And I'm going to give them this little box, and it's going to have all the answers. And I went out to my first vendor fair, and grandmothers.
That's what I was just going to say. That's what I was going to say.
I don't know how to engage with my grandchild.
Yes.
I mean, they feel like there's a it's like this whole generation that's keeping them from. Yeah. And so they would buy these things up like mad.
Yeah.
And it really made me think. I thought, this is so great for them, because it's like that I have a blueprint that they can follow, and they can just kind of go through, and it gets them started. And once you get started, then it's easy.
It gets a lot easier.
It's like start anywhere, just start.
Yeah.
And so, and I laugh because I have how to make a sourdough starter and keep track of it. And I tell parents, I mean, you want to talk about a great lesson in responsibility? Have your kids start a sourdough starter and take care of it. You can
we do a sourdough at our house. It's a family thing. We do a sourdough. Yeah. We know when we have to feed it, and we take turns, feeding it and measuring everything out. And
you can teach so much through a sourdough starter. It's responsibility. It's science. It's so much that you can get from a sourdough starter.
Yes.
And so, those are some of the things. And I have, so I've also created something called these little story starters that I have on my site. And I have little finger puppets that you can act out the stories. And so the whole idea being, I present girls with a problem and they have to solve it. And then they actually submit their ideas to the site. And then if they're good, I'll post them on the site, because I'm trying to teach girls. Who cares about how I would solve these problems? Or even adults. I want to know how kids would solve these problems, because girls need autonomy, and that's self-confidence, So it's like trying to give kids this kind of autonomy and confidence building activities at this age is so good for them. So good for them. But it all starts with engagement and connection and communication. So that is the road to happiness, is through connection.
Well, it is. I mean, you go to, and then we'll wrap up, but like you do go to the longest ever study on happiness, right? So they follow the same people for 80 plus years. It's still going on. But the number one takeaway, the biggest takeaway, was that your happiness levels, and looking back at your life, the happier people were the people that had the strongest relationships and connections throughout their life.
Yep.
Right? That's what it's all about. And I think so much of us, we live in this very individualized, not even selfish, but we feel like we have to be independent and do it all on our own. And we forget that we have all these people around us to do this thing we call life with, and we're supposed to do it together. And so I love this whole world you've created. We're going to share links. We'll share photos of the stuff for everyone. And you seriously go check it all out, because it's so charming how it's done, but it's so wonderful what you're trying to do for parents and girls, and it has a big impact. So thank you.
And did you see my shirt?
I did. I was going to make a joke halfway through. She's wearing a shirt that's the Grateful Bread, and it's all the girl characters, the bread characters. I love it.
For Thanksgiving,
there's so much to do in this little world you have too. I love a good pun, so I'm just bought in on it.
I live with puns. I mean, it's all about creating a good pun.
Well,
so yes.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you for doing this work and having so much passion around it, and giving your heart and your light to this work, because it's so important. So thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Jess. And anytime, I'm telling you, anytime, anywhere you ask, and I will be there.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.